A lot of you have been asking about it ever since I posted about it over on Instagram and featured it in the recent Workflow Wednesday videos. So here it finally is. This is everything you need to know about how to mod the OPV or to adjust the brew pressure of your Rocket Appartamento. So before we get started, this is the quick disclaimer that I am not responsible for any damage you cause to yourself or your machine. Please use common sense and understand the risks of doing this to your machine and potentially voiding your warranty, so take caution and proceed only at your own risk. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's start with the tools that you're going to need to get this mod done. Okay, so first you're obviously going to need a pressure gauge. I'll leave a link to the one I picked up in the description down below. I actually got this one shipped from Europe because it's black and there weren't a lot of black options available in the US, but I'll leave a US alternative as well. I believe this was about, after the conversion, between 20 and 30 bucks, so it's relatively cheap. So the next thing you're going to need is a wrench, and this might not be the exact size. I'll put it somewhere up on the screen once I actually get back into the machine. I have done this mod already, but you're going to need one of these. And finally, you are also going to need a screwdriver kit, or more specifically, you're going to need a small Phillips head screwdriver, as well as one of those hex key type things. And again, I'll show close-ups and provide any information on the exact sizes if I have those available to me as well. Okay, so moving on to how do you actually get into this machine and adjust the OPV or adjusting your brew pressure. Now at stock, this machine came in at about 13 to 14 bars of pressure, which obviously is a little bit high compared to the industry standard of 9. Now, depending on where you purchase your machine from, some manufacturers, from what I've heard, have already brought the pressure down to 9, so you might not have to worry about it. I would double check with wherever you bought it from. But for me, I bought this machine from Seattle Coffee Gear and I got it at 13 to 14 bars at stock. Okay, so first and foremost, with doing any mods or changes to your machine, obviously you want to make sure your machine is completely cooled down to the touch. I've had this off now for pretty much the entire day. It's now in the evening and I haven't used it since the morning. And obviously also make sure your machine is unplugged so that you don't risk electrocuting yourself. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need to do is remove the top of the machine. To do that, you're first going to need to remove the cup rails, and then there are a few screws that you'll need to unscrew in order to remove the top panel of the machine. So removing the cup rail is relatively easy. All you need to do is sort of pick it up by the two front portions and then pull it forward, and it kind of just comes off just like that. And the next thing you're going to want to do is also remove your water reservoir, and it also just pulls straight up and out of the machine very easily. Okay, so with that out of the way, there are two screws in the front, left, and right sides of the machine that use the little hex key type thing to unscrew. Once that's done, you can switch over to a Phillips head screwdriver, and it's going to be quite small. So now there are 4 small screws that we're going to have to unscrew that are on all 4 corners of where the water reservoir sits. And underneath in the bottom of the water reservoir area, there are 2 larger Phillips head screws that we'll also need to remove. Okay, and now with all of those screws removed, we can go ahead and lift the top portion of the machine off. Once the top panel is off, we can also remove the metal portion of the water reservoir. Now inside the machine, you'll actually see a little bit of water where the water reservoir plugs into, so I'm just going to go ahead and absorb that with some paper towels. This step is not super necessary, but I'd rather not have any water mess around inside the machine. Okay, so now that we have our machine fully open and exposed, you want to locate this little brass nut here. Now this is what we're going to adjust in order to adjust our brew pressure. Okay, so adjusting your brew pressure is actually extremely easy. All you're going to need is this 1/2-inch wrench. Yes, I figured out what size you needed. And positioning yourself from the back of the machine facing towards the front of it, you're going to want to turn anti-clockwise. So turning that brass nut anti-clockwise or left will result in lowering the pressure, and turning it right will result in increasing it. Before you do that, there's one small thing I do recommend you do, and that's to take a little Sharpie and draw a straight line down just so that you know where your starting point was. And from there, I would suggest starting with 2 full turns if your machine at stock was about 13 to 14 bars of pressure. Now, on my first attempt at doing this mod, it started at about 13 to 14 bars of pressure when I first measured the brew pressure of the machine, and so I made a 2.5 turn adjustment, and that brought it down to about 7. So I'm probably going to bring it back just up a little bit just to see if I can hit that 9 range and save the lower brew pressure shots for my Flare 58. Once you've made your adjustment, you want to go ahead and work in reverse and close up the machine, first putting in the metal tank that holds the water reservoir and then the lid, and of course screw everything down tightly back to how it originally was. Okay, so now that we've adjusted our OPV, in my case I've done it yet again, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to install the pressure gauge. Now depending on where you buy this from, it might come with a copper washer or two. I wish I had those because when this is screwed in all the way tight, it's not actually facing perfectly straight, which is a little bit annoying because I would like to have it on perfectly level, but it is what it is, and at the end of the day, it's a temporary thing that briefly shows me what the pressure is, and after that, I don't really need it again, because once you've set the pressure, it really shouldn't change. So for the most part, I actually keep a temperature gauge on my machine, which I will talk a little bit more about in a future video, but for now, let's move on to how to install the pressure gauge itself. Okay, so I already have the temperature gauge on my machine, so I'm going to have to remove that in order to put my pressure gauge on before I show you what the pressure now looks like. But basically, at the front of your E61 group head, you'll have this little knob that you should be able to unscrew. Now, I believe at stock, if you don't already have something on your machine, you're going to need a large hex key to get it off. I'll post a picture of it here online because I kind of forgot where I put my original little piece. Okay, so once you get that little knob or whatever it is you have on your E61 group head at the moment off, you're going to want to keep the copper washer if you have any. I believe 2 would make it perfectly level. Unfortunately, I only had 1, and my nearest Home Depot didn't have any washers that were exactly this dimension. So my pressure gauge is going to be a little bit lopsided or upside down. Don't worry about it. You can still read it just fine, and it works perfectly fine. So the pressure gauge itself is actually extremely simple. All it is this one little piece and potentially a washer or two. You're just going to want to put the copper washer on the end of it and screw it back into that hole in the E61 group head, and that's basically it. And that's it. So once you screw it in nice and tight, next thing you're going to want to do is grab a blind basket, stick it in a portafilter, plug your machine back in, and turn it on. After a few seconds, you should see the needle move, and it should now tell you where your brew pressure is at on the Rocket Appartamento. Now obviously, if you didn't quite go low enough and you wanted to bring your brew pressure down a little bit lower, you're gonna have to repeat the process of opening up your machine in order to adjust that nut yet again. However, I think the results are worth it, and if your machine is stock at 13 to 14 bars, it definitely helps to bring it down to 9 bars of pressure, which not only helps with channeling, but in my experience, I found that I've gotten sweeter shots as well, which I obviously really enjoy. So anyways, that's gonna be it on this video for how to adjust the brew pressure on your Rocket Appartamento. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it helpful. Leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you aren't already, and I will see you in the next one.